There are certain days when your whole life stops making sense, and you wonder if you've unknowingly become a character in someone else's tragedy. For me, that moment arrived as I stood on the worn mat in front of my house, clutching a piece of paper from the bank that bore my name. Tied to a mountain of debt I had never seen, for a signature I never gave. My hands trembled as I pressed my thumb over those 3 familiar syllables. In that surreal silence, while the smell of frying oil clung to my clothes from my little street-side snack shop, I faced a truth no one ever warns you about. Sometimes, your own name becomes a stranger's weapon. That was also the day my father-in-law passed away quietly in his room, a man whose shadow still lingered in every corner of our home, his authority heavy as the winter wind. I had crossed the threshold of 59, convinced I'd long ago mastered the art of treading softly, of enduring quietly, having weathered 35 years of marriage to Young Soo, and even more years of caring for my mother-in-law. Since her stroke, she depended on me for the smallest things, a sip of water, the assurance that she was seen, and I'd lived with the strange loneliness of being both caregiver and witness to her frailty. Our days revolved around her moods, our nights splintered into broken sleep as I watched over her, collecting every coin I earned to buy her medicine, her diapers, her dignity. Young Soo, my husband, spoke often of filial duty, but lived it only in words. He was nowhere to be found when work became hard or when responsibility pressed in. His jobs changed as quickly as the seasons, and meanwhile, his younger brother Minsu's failing factory became the new excuse for missing money, for more strain. The money I earned from my modest snack shop paid for everything. I balanced the accounts nightly, turning out every pocket for loose coins, because it was the only part of my life I truly controlled. If my in-law's house was a kingdom, my father-in-law ruled it with the echo of his seal, that heavy stamp that meant his word was law. Decisions tumbled down from his nods. His sighs made us hold our breath. For Young Soo, that weight was honor. For me, it was enough to bring on pain so acute I woke before dawn with my insides in knots. The bank's notice fluttered in the evening breeze, and I drew my granddaughter's magnifier from my pocket, reading the line with my name again and again. They say a person's name is their most precious possession. Yet now mine was shackled to a debt as foreign as the cold, bureaucratic language was sharp. Surety guarantee. The phrase stung more deeply than any oil burn from my shop. My father-in-law's breathing faded before sunset. In his absence, I felt our house shift, as if its core was hollowed out. Family members took their places. My brother-in-law, Minsu, desperate over his factory, scurried with stacks of documents. My sister-in-law, Jong-hee, recited the years she'd simmered rice and memories for family rights. Young-soo straightened his posture and repeated the phrase, eldest son, as if it contained a map out of the chaos. I stood quietly behind, clutching my mother-in-law's fragile hand, tethered more to her vulnerability than my own strength. The weight of condolence was nothing compared to the shadow cast by that bank notice. While others mourned, my mind rehearsed every way demand letters would soon find me. After my mother-in-law's fall, we'd installed a small security camera, its red light blinking in one corner of the living room. The plan had been to safeguard her, but it left unseen a triangular patch, a notorious blind spot, sharp as the secrets festering in our home. No sooner had we ended the funeral rites than family discord broke open, raw and unrelenting. Minsu paced, papers waving, citing debts and contributions. Jung-hee tallied every act of service she'd performed. Young-soo swelled with eldest son pride, as if authority might blot out his past evasions. I watched all this while still managing the life of diapers and pills, my own voice lost beneath their clamor. But the true danger wasn't on the printed page. Debt was paper. The blade was family. To flee would be to bleed alone. To confront the storm would slash even deeper. So I did as I'd always done. I endured. Suspicion seeped through every conversation. Minsu insisted a will existed. Jong-hee denied it. Young-soo offered only shrugs. Despite my years in the house, I finally understood that in our home, truth was less substantial than the fog that collected on the living room window. The days stretched on, and a second letter arrived from the bank, this one colder, counting down the days before my world would be seized. Snack shop, house, all that I'd built. Collateral if the unnamed sum was not paid soon. I could not understand how my seal had found its way onto the documents, how the debt became mine. I closed the tattered ledger of my snack shop and visited the district office for counsel. There, words swirled around me. Fraud, forgery, criminal charges, divorce, so foreign they clung like unwelcome threads to my jacket. But at home, the daily grind unspooled every worry. The right bathwater temperature for my mother-in-law, her pills, her breathing. I watched her with the intensity of one who already knows life can unravel in the blink of an eye. As days slipped by in this haze, one evening I sat before the camera feed, reviewing the room again and again. The blind spot yawned between a shabby cabinet and an old lamp, the carpet oddly folded like a crescent moon. The stand was nudged away from the wall, the carpet's curve widened, a deliberate widening of the blind field. The night before the funeral, that space had seen the most footsteps. Someone had adjusted things, making the camera miss even more. I looked for what the eye often misses. The half-wiped glass on the cabinet, a glove left on a windowsill. The line of dust shifted behind the lamp, a fallen leaf atop a drawer. In these trivial details, I read immensity. Someone that night had created the perfect cover for themselves. I focused now on people, not numbers, the true shadows. With the formal inheritance dispute underway and the threat of debt looming ever closer, the fractures in our family deepened. Young-soo distanced himself from responsibility, framing me as the practical one. Min-soo's desperation sharpened his movements. Jong-hee retreated, her gestures jittery with suspicion and pride. My mother-in-law, confused by day and night, would sometimes meet my gaze with heartbreaking clarity, an unspoken record of all she had seen. At the bank, I obtained copies of the offending documents. Every detail matched, right down to my awkwardly forged signature and the clean slice of my seal. A seal I stored in the safe beneath a pile of snack shop receipts, protected by a code only family knew. Was it possible one of them had taken it? I stacked the questions within me like stones, knowing that any answer would demand painful clarity. The nights became longer, my breath shorter. Truth, I realized, has its own smell, a mix of old ink and fear. I was determined to identify the culprit, to reclaim my name and future. A rainy afternoon gave me an answer I hadn't expected. I closed my shop early and sifted through drawers in my father-in-law's room. Deep in the closet, I found an old notebook, the edges smoothed by years of anxious hands. Inside were scrawled thoughts, plans for dividing the estate, assurances of fairness among his children, and at the end, a thin envelope stamped, certified copy of will. My heart thudded as I pressed the envelope between my palms, hope and dread mingling with each beat. I carried it to the legal aid service at the district office. The contents were succinct. The person who cared for his wife would be provided with ongoing support and shop rights, while the house and land would be divided equally among the 3 siblings, without any special privileges to the eldest. For the first time in ages, I could breathe. Yet the debt remained a separate beast. Even with the will, the guarantee document pressed in, chaining me to a past that was not mine. I resolved to get to the bottom of it, hunting through every family hiding place. I opened the safe at my snack shop, feeling the cold edge of the emergency key brush my finger. Deep in a false-bottomed compartment, I uncovered evidence: a sponge case holding the impression of my stamp, a dried-out red ink pad, all recently touched. Someone had accessed it in secret. I pored over the camera footage, stopping and playing over and over until a single frame caught my breath. On the edge of the camera's vision, the lamp's metal base reflected a distorted shadow. A figure paused, a shoe tip nudging the carpet, right at the threshold of the blind spot. That shoe, dull and black, belonged to Young-soo. My heart hollowed out, and I willed myself to steady breaths, feeling every string of my nerves pull taut. The change in the carpet's placement, the smudges on the glass, the clumsy signature and missing documents, the clues merged into a single bleak truth. I had suspected Jong-hee for so long. Her careful movements, her evasive presence near the kitchen, even her tone. But, in truth, it was Young-soo who had silently orchestrated the entire charade. Moving the lamp, expanding the camera's blind spot, forging my seal. He had blamed Min-soo's failing business, but had used my identity to rescue himself from debts racked up by his own risky speculations. The entire stage, complete with blame, suspicion, and distraction, was Young-soo's doing, and he'd used the blind spot for his curtain call. A final piece of the puzzle came from the CCTV technician. Young-soo had, weeks before, requested a change to the camera angle, making the blind spot almost complete. My mind replayed every shared meal, every night together, with new clarity, a betrayal that rewrote decades of companionship. My father-in-law must have guessed the tension, for he'd left a handwritten note beside my name in the will, insisting that whoever misused the family seal or shirked care of his wife would forfeit any special rights. Even as his body failed, his sense of order endured. And still, on his deathbed, someone had slipped through the cracks to rewrite the ending for their own sake. It was time to make decisions. The first steps were practical. I applied to a community care center, enrolling my mother-in-law, so I wasn't the only pillar propping up her world. I presented the will to legal advisors, who confirmed its validity, and I launched mediation for the inheritance. Hardest of all, I set an appointment to discuss late-life divorce. The words sucked the air from my lungs. Old habits made me hesitate, but I pressed on. I could not let my name be tossed on someone else's game board. Young-soo avoided me after that. I did not confront him, but I gathered what evidence I had, trusting the process ahead. Min-soo was stunned. Jong-hee couldn't look me in the eye. Yet for the first time, I felt the strength that comes only from owning the truth, however painful. I kept on, day by day. At mediation, every detail was scrutinized: the fraudulent guarantee, the will, the inheritance, my declining health from years of solitary caregiving. I learned to speak plainly, unfolding gnarled hands and steadying my voice. The court affirmed the authenticity of the will, and division of assets followed. No special favoritism, only the rights prescribed in my father-in-law's hand. The question of the forged documents was handed over to investigators. With help from a victims' support group, I managed to keep my home and my shop, if only barely. Each time, another shiver of fear crossed me. I steadied myself, found a way to keep moving. Life shifted to a gentler rhythm. My mother-in-law adapted to the care center, and I reclaimed small corners of my own days, matching her socks, buttoning her coat, waving her off on the care center bus each morning. There was, suddenly, more sunlight in the house. The old lamp's shadow was replaced by a new planter, soaking up the light. Half a year later, I made a new seal. My name and surname etched deep. My fingers, older now, closed around it with fresh purpose. Not a weapon, but the sturdy root anchoring me through all seasons. It might have seemed late for me to take such actions, but in truth, it was exactly the right time. Better 1,000 small regrets than one great one. Better to move my own lamp than live forever under another's shadow. As I look back, over seasons cut deep into my back, the map of my care, my sacrifice, my survival, I find a kind of pride in having rescued the warmth hiding in small kindnesses, in having finally safeguarded my own name. Perhaps there are still unnoticed blind spots in my life, but nowadays, if one appears, I am strong enough to shift the lamp and sweep the carpet myself, without waiting for someone else's permission. So, I ask you, when family becomes a tangle of loyalty and self-preservation, where would you draw the line, and what courage would you claim for your own name?